Dane Rose, and today I want to explore masculine and feminine energy, chauvinism, and some of the implications in male-female relationships. So the first thing that I want to say is that in roughly 25% of the languages, I believe there are just over 600 languages practiced on the planet today. Of the roughly 10,000 languages we've had in human history, about 25% of them, including Arabic, French, and I believe Russian, differentiate in the language between something that is masculine and feminine. In one of the oldest correlations with this, we have the Chinese expression of yin and yang. And what all of these have in common is a sense of polarity. And I want to talk about that polarity here, just so we have a sense of, for those of us who speak English, and this polarity is a little bit nebulous, what we're talking about. And so what are some examples of the masculine pole? And to give an example of polarity, for example, if you have someone giving something, to complete the circle, there has to be someone receiving it. In other words, you don't have a giver without a receiver. You can have an offerer and a decliner, but you can't have a giver without a receiver. You can't have a teacher without a student. A teacher is someone who imparts knowledge. Well, if there's no one to impart it to, it's hard to call themselves a teacher. They may have the skill to teach, but to actually teach, you have to have a student. To communicate, to speak, you must have a listener. And so in flow, and this is a very important aspect of human chemistry, in flow, you have two sides of a polar energy creating, just like a battery, the positive and the negative charge, an electrical current. And we call this chemistry because it is. It's chemistry on a physical level when the positive and the negative pole come together in an arc that is powering this moment as we speak. It's chemistry on an emotional level when an impulse and a reaction partner to create flow, when a stimulus and a response partner to create flow. It's chemistry when there is a teacher and a student that are effectively flowing. Now, let's look then at, what are the masculine, I'm just grabbing a pen here, what are the masculine parts of this pole? And remember, we're not talking about men and women. Obviously, men can teach and women can teach. Men can give and women can give, which is an important part, that both men and women embody both poles. It's an important distinction. So you have the teacher, you have the speaker, you have the initiator, you have the asker, you have the doer, you have the pursuer, you have the leader, you have the writer, you have the giver. So these are just a couple of the different faces of the masculine pole, because with the teacher comes the student, with the speaker comes the listener, with the initiator comes the responder, with the asker comes the responder, with the doer comes the beer, with the pursuer comes the pursued or courted, with the leader comes the follower, with the writer comes the reader, with the giver comes the receiver. And I want you to take a moment and just check in, because we're just gone through, a very small list of the polarities. Now, what makes a polarity in this sense of feminine and masculine, and a true scientific polarity, is what we're dealing with the battery. In other words, if you just have the positive pole of the battery without the negative pole, you don't get electricity. If you say that, okay, the positive pole is more important than the negative pole, so we're going to put 25% of the battery to the negative pole, because that's not very important, and the rest is going to be for the positive pole. The entire battery is reduced to the lowest common denominator. So in reality, there are some things that are lifted to the highest common denominator. That might be, for example, in giving. For example, let's say we need to raise money for a child's operation, and there's 100 people in the room, and the operation costs $100,000. So you go to person number one, will you give $100,000? Will you give anything? No. You go through 98% of the people there, and they give a few dollars or nothing. And then one person gives the balance, gives $80,000. So this is an example of a dynamic in which something lifts to the highest common denominator. But there are other things that that sink to the lowest common denominator. And chemistry is one of those things. For example, if you've got two people in the room, and one person says, what do you want to do? And the other person says, no, what do you want to do? And the other person says, no, I just want to do whatever you want to do. We're dealing with two negative poles. We're dealing, there's no initiation in the dynamic. And so it sinks down to, either, well, we'll do whatever, a very low level activity, or nothing at all. So there needs to be an equivalent amount of positive juice in this battery to the negative juice in this battery to reach the maximum lifespan and or the maximum voltage within the battery. Because one or two things can happen if you only allow 20% of the battery for the negative charge. Either the battery runs out after 20% of its life, or it runs at 20% of its possible juice. So this is the principle scientifically, and you can look at those areas in a roll of, which are true polarities by the same kind of thing. For example, can you teach without someone learning? It's kind of hard. It's teacher arrives at school, makes up a beautiful blackboard, starts talking to an empty room. Is that teaching? Who is it teaching? In other words, you have to have someone on the other side. Now, the next question is, in any true polarity where the one cannot exist without the other, is one more important than the other, more significant, more important, more valuable than the other? In other words, in a battery, is the negative charge more or less valuable than the positive charge? And I would ask you that question right now. Is the negative charge of the battery more important, or the positive charge of the battery? Now, I don't know what your answer is, but a scientist will say this is absurd. This is a ridiculous question, because a scientist is looking at electrical output. That's the purpose of the battery, to produce electricity. If it's not doing that, either because there's too little positive or too little negative, or let's say, from a scientific point of view, no engineer worth their salts will put up with waste. Think of a greedy capitalist, business person, that's salivating night and day to make a buck. And this is one of the stereotypes out there of corporations. But can you imagine that, this everything to cut corners, we'll dump oil in the swamps so we don't have to pay the dump fees. We'll tell the people that it's the number one in the world when we're just making that up, and because statistically speaking that increases sales 5%. Even though everyone knows it's rubbish, it still kind of works on 5% of the population. So we'll put that in our ads. We'll pay money here. We'll do this. Can you imagine that persona of efficiency? Like constant refinement and more, saying, well, it's fine if we produce batteries that aren't very popular because they run out quickly because there's more positive charge than negative charge. It's a joke. Or the same person saying we're going to hire students, we're going to hire teachers that don't have any students to pay for it, etc. So the whole ethos of capitalism is maximizing return on investment through enlightened self-interest or unenlightened self-interest, to make as much money as possible per money invested. This is the whole thing. And so from that point of view, all the engineers and scientists, that are hired to maximize efficiency. You bring in a designer and this and that. It's to maximize efficiency. So we're looking for flow here. And what you see is that the sweet point is balance. That's where the highest efficiency, when there is exactly 50% negative pole, exactly 50% positive pole, when there is a perfect partnership to create a beautiful electric current that is, powering an entire city, and it's, and the amount of electricity matches the demand so that production responds to the demand. Not we need twice as much electricity at 3 p.m., but let's just have brownouts. When there's a responsiveness. And so this is what healthy chemistry looks like. positive charge, negative charge, in perfect balance, attuned to the needs of the situation. But you may notice something about our culture, because our culture is not scientific. Our culture pays a lot of tribute to the scientific paradigm, particularly around money. But when it comes to human relationships, romance, etc., it is decidedly unscientific. And you can kind of notice it in this area here, where, for example, have you been honored in your life for the times you have learned or the times you have taught more? Would you go home in your culture and say, Mom, Dad, or friend or lover, I'm a student. I'm learning really well, and expect the same degree of praise and recognition as to, I got my teaching degree, I'm teaching really well. I took Toastmaster classes at some point because I was a bit rusty. I hadn't taught for a while. I wanted to do some classes. And so I went to Toastmasters. And the entire curriculum is organized to teach speaking. There is not one iota of time given to listening. All the measurements, all the attention is on bringing the speaking up to par. And in some levels, the listening at Toastmasters is atrocious. Because one of the things that, in these polarities is we have the mental or the thought, we have the emotional or the feeling. The mental is masculine, it's the structure, the idea, the feeling, the response that comes from every idea. Meaning every single thought we have produces a feeling. Now, we don't control the feeling directly. This is one of the ironies in the Ten Commandments. The fourth commandment, thou shalt love, emotion, thy parents, is a commandment to feel. But any of us who have paid any attention whatsoever, when a gun gets pointed at our head and says, love me, it doesn't produce love. It may produce the word when the gun's pointed at your head, but the feeling is fear. It's like, oh my God, I'm dealing with a psychopath. What's going on? It's not, gee, this is great motivation to love. Let me feel love. No, you can say the words, I love you. Fine, I love you. But the emotion is, and the thought is, okay, I'll say whatever they want me to say. You can't command a feeling, but you can command a thought. You can say, I want you to think about pink elephants. And that's pretty easy to do. You all thought about a pink elephant. I want you to feel love. That's a little bit more indirect, because saying I want you to feel love doesn't produce the feeling of love. Taking the time to get to know you, learning the things that you like to hear, learning the things that, learning your love language, etc., and then following that path, being safe in the way that you like safety, giving you the things you like to receive, engaging you at a rhythm and a pace that feels pleasurable to you rather than overstimulating or boring. All of these things may induce the feeling of love, depending on my skill, your skill as a communicator, etc., how much I care about doing all those things and all that. That may induce the feeling of love, but you can't command a feeling, just feel love. It's a little easier to command a feeling, but you can't even say feel fear. You have to do something that produces the fear. So the doing, the masculine, the feminine, the response. So we got blindness right into our culture, since we also all grow up with the Christian mythology in the United States, at least. It's the dominant mythology. So even if you're not a Christian, you know that a whole segment of the population believes that you're a sinner, believes that God is a sadistic motherfucker who sends, it's like, of course it's his son, that's because sons are more important. And then, it's like the most powerful being in the universe comes up with nailing his child to a cross as the way to redeem the flawed humanity that he created, and will burn in a lake of fire if they don't do what he told them to do. And this is his fucked up idea of paradise and redemption. I mean, this is a joke. It's a masculine joke. But this is, again, a context, as with chauvinism, that we all grow up with, unless we consciously take another path. And even then, there is an influence. It's like, what if I'm wrong? Or what if all those other people think I'm bad? Or what if I think I'm bad because so many people around me think I'm bad? For example, this is something that homosexuals in our culture have to deal with to varying degrees. If someone's had a gun pointed to their head and been beaten half to death and this and that and the other because they were homosexuals, and it was done in the name of Christianity, and God hates this. It's harder to just say what a bunch of crap when you've nearly died from that bunch of crap, because the story may be full of shit, but if there are people out there with guns willing to beat you to death, you got to deal with them. It's like, that's a reality. People in this world have freedom to hurt one another and freedom to be kind to one another. Someone wants to do you in, there's not that much that can stop them. Any single human on the planet, if they get something up their rear end about you, and it's important enough to them, can make it their mission to kill you, make your life miserable, steal your identity, blah, 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 blah. And the good news is, it's not very fun to destroy other human beings' lives. So it doesn't happen that often. It's just not very fun. The other person has to live through hell to do all that. So anyway, we have the masculine and feminine energy. We have the sweet point being flow. And then we have pain points. And I want to talk about what it's like to be in the masculine pole and feel pain. It's to say, hey, how about this? And the other person, what's that? How about this? I'll think about it. You can feel how the energy has just gone down. What about this? Excitement, joy, you've got a strong positive charge. I'd love to do this with you. Are you up for it? How about this? How about that? What about this? What about that? Well, maybe, not that. No. So you can see how there's no feminine pole there. The feminine pole is the one that says, yes, that's flow. How about this? Yes. Or that flips it around and changes roles and says, great idea, feminine. Thank you, feminine. I appreciate you thinking of me. Emotional, feminine. What I'd rather do is it would be a 10 out of 10 for me to do this with you. We're going into masculine. Then we go to the other person. Well, no, I don't want to do that. I only want to do my idea. Well, I only want to do my idea. You've got two positives here. They're going to short out. There's no flow. So you disengage. You look for another feminine pole. How about this? How about you over here? You want to go to this movie? You want to go to this movie? You want to go? Well, man, and if there's no feminine pole, there's no, yes, I want to go. You have pain. All that positive enthusiasm just slowly is worn down, hitting a wall. It's like that spark hits another drain point or another spark, and it drains the battery. And at the end of that, there's no masculine energy. It's like nobody wants to go to the movie with me. Nobody wants to see the movie I want. Nobody wants to talk about what I want to talk about. Nobody wants to do this. It's pain for the masculine. So this is one thing. Confusion, ambivalence, and no are all pain for the masculine. So is shame, judgment, attack, and avoidance. So masculine pursues. I'm calling you, you don't return the call. Calling you, you don't return the call. The feminine pole is to answer that. Man or woman, doesn't matter. Answer the call. I'm happy to hear from you. But I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. And so the skill is in creating flow between these two parts. That's when there's value. That's when there's dimension. That's when there's energy. That's when there's juice. Now, there's a whole, so it's skillful. It's skillful to be feminine, to create flow, to lead with flow. It's skillful to be masculine. But the only juice in that kind of things that get reduced to the lowest common denominator, chemistry is one of those. If you have a, hey, how about this? And there is no one to say yes to that, the energy goes down to the lowest common denominator, to the lack of flow. Or how about the other side? What's pain look like for the feminine? I'm open, I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm waiting, and no one's initiating. I'm just here, present, open, innocent, alive, because there's another polarity. You have the pole of innocence. Innocence is one of the most feminine and sacred energies there is in human beings, because it's completely unbiased. See, innocence doesn't have an opinion, doesn't have a shape, doesn't have political leanings, doesn't have movie leanings. Innocent is open. It's profound newness. It's like it's the newness of a child. And it's the most potent and powerful energy on the planet, because it can go anywhere. In the tarot card, it's the Fool. The Fool is the one who doesn't know the obstacles, who doesn't know the rules. So they don't apply to the Fool. It's much later when it's like, no, I can't do that because after 9 p.m. I can't do that because it's that's this and that's this and this. And we learn these very, 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 arcane mazes of rules and this and that and the other. And to get anything done, it has to go through this whole convoluted maze. The Fool doesn't see the maze. It just sees a possibility, the innocent one. So innocence is very powerful. But there's no one leading. There's no one showing up. There's no one with an idea. There's no invitation. And so the feminine is waiting. There's no leadership. Or there is, again, shame and dishonor. This is the other pain point for the feminine. So what do I mean, shame and dishonor? One of the things that we do in our culture is we shame gullibility. Gullibility is a form of innocence, and we shame it. We shame it more than we shame abuse. So what? Back to the bigger part of the story. A scientist cannot come up with a mathematical equation that says the teacher is more or less valuable than the student. They can't exist without one another. The speaker is not more valuable than the listener, and the scientist, you take this into electrical terms. You have the plug, the three prongs, and then you have the outlet with the three holes. And in this particular thing, I've actually reversed them. The plug, masculine, the point, the receptacle, feminine, the circle, the space in which to insert. Obviously with, in the male-female dynamic, if you're going to do that, the woman is more feminine. The brain, the testosterone levels, because one of the other things we have in the masculine-feminine polarity is strategic thought, getting to the point, masculine, strategy, masculine, the spear, hunting, masculine, the diffuse awareness, feminine, the spontaneous impulse, feminine, in both men and women. There's a place for both. But the male body is leaning, 10 to 30%, more predisposed to the masculine because of the hormones, because of testosterone. The need for doing something, for stimulation to activate and keep the attention. This is a little bit more male than female, but it's important to emphasize that it's an influence. The hormones are an influence. They are not control. One, because a man who doesn't want to be as masculine or who enjoys their feminine side more can take hormones to change that physiological leaning, number one, can change gender, physiologically, number two. But more importantly, there are plenty of men who are more feminine than women. I have a brother who never asks for anything, but he's a pretty good person to say yes if anyone else asks him. Pretty good. So he's never going to be the asker. He's not going to be the initiator. But he will say yes if someone else asks. So in that area, my brother is more feminine. Perception and conception. Perception, to see something, to let something come in rather than to go out looking to conceptualize something, to make a thought out of something rather than to open to a thought, to allow something to come in, more feminine. This is an area where I'm strongly feminine, opening up to possibility, being a very feminine energy. It's very diffuse. Actuality, very masculine. It's very focused. There's billions of possible things, and this is the only one. This is the point. This is what's actually happening. This is what's possible. This is what's happening. Diffuse, focused. The circle, feminine. The point, masculine. And the thing is, our culture has taught me that the speaker is more important than the listener. The teacher is more important than the student. That if I get something done, that matters. If I be a certain way, it's like, yeah, it's not very important. If I follow, yeah, you want to be a follower, be a leader, be a leader. Don't be a follower, be a leader. Don't be an employee, feminine. Be a business owner. Don't follow the herd, invent the herd. There's constant cultural message that the masculine is more important than the feminine. The leader is more important than the people they lead. It's obviously a skewed definition of leadership, because in the truest sense of leader, it is the person who serves those they are leading, who brings about more well-being as a result of their leadership. That is that's the situation. I don't want to be a receiver. I don't want to need something. This is particularly shamed in America. There is no place that I have ever encountered in America where being needy and or having needs is honored more or equal to meeting the needs, where receiving is equal to giving. And yet, if giving is valuable, what is the value of giving? It's wonderful. It's, to love and be loved, for example, two of the most profound human experiences possible. To love and be loved. Most people who have access to a wide range of choice with power, i.e. they have their millions, they can be anywhere in the world, they can do any kind of work they want to do, they can retire, they can do anything they want. They've got freedom. They can buy anything they want. Most of them, aside from the addictive element, which I'm not dealing with right here, will say that giving love and having it be received, and receiving love and having it freely and willingly given from a place of honor, not pity, not chauvinism, not patronizing, but I see something beautiful in you, and I want to honor that with a gift. I want to give to you. Most people with power and freedom will acknowledge that nothing is more valuable. But both are destroyed, just like the battery, if you take off the negative pole, meaning they cannot give if no one will receive. And no one can give to them if they won't receive. So the receiving on a technical level is equal to giving. The feminine, on a technical scientific level, is always, by definition, Yin is equal to yang, yang is equal to yin, feminine is equal to masculine, masculine is equal to feminine. By definition, by scientific equation. What's quite interesting is how many cultures over the last 4,000 years, given this science, have ignored the science and overvalued the masculine while undervaluing the feminine. We would see in this prediction model that there would be no one lining up wanting to play feminine roles. And that's what we see. When I write to 100 women online in the United States, among the more chauvinistic of cultures, and it's both chauvinistic in terms of its overvaluing of the masculine and feminine, but it's also feminist, which has taken the form of no woman should be caught in the feminine role. Women can play just as hardball as men, basically. So there's a competition in younger generations in the United States to occupy the masculine role. Don't you let him tell you what to do. Meaning, don't you let him be in the masculine role. Don't be caught in the feminine role. You tell him what to do. That's my girl. Don't be less than him. The trouble is when the bias is deeper than the gender, when the bias is in the energy pole, when the real problem is that yin is valued less than yang. I mean, scientists throw up their hands at this point. It's like, how do you deal with a culture that's so dumb? It thinks the positive pole in a battery is more important than the negative pole. The whole culture is fucked from that point because every single thing is going to be most efficient, most graceful, most beautiful, most flowing, most valuable when they are equal. But in a culture that starts off with the default that they're not equal, that's not going to happen. Now, as soon as you say, if you bring me a plug, I'll give you $5. And if you bring me an outlet, I'll give you $3. Women are paid less than men, except when they're highly masculine. One of the things that leads to a raise is asking for it. Masculine pole. The men with the boost of testosterone are more likely to go to their boss, say, I think I'm doing all right. I'd like a raise. How about it? They're more likely to do that than women. They've got the hormones to back them up on that impulse. So they're on that level, they have a biological edge. And we have bosses that do not honor the feminine. So the boss doesn't say, wow, I am so lucky that this person waits for me to give them a raise and give them what's fair. I'm going to honor that. No. We have a culture that betrays the feminine. So the very fact that he or she is waiting, he or she, it doesn't matter, that the one isn't asking, is a sign of denigration and status reduction. So where in certain Asian cultures, the masculine really understands their honor, and they will do anything for their employees. They will pay their medical bills. They'll send them back home if their mother's sick. They will do all kinds of things beyond the normal employer role. So in Asian cultures, in the honorable expression of that, the masculine protects the feminine. But in the dishonorable cultures that do not value, in this case, the waiting, the allowing, and reward that, the one in the feminine role gets paid less, 30% less, in fact. Now, I've actually noticed this as an American contractor because I can play both roles. The feminine role is always more fun. It's more spontaneous, more emotional, more enjoyable, more playful. Everything about the feminine is more, it's what life is all about, the feminine. In the healthy breakdown of the roles, the masculine protects the feminine, which is the real gem in both men and women. All the strategy, all the money is spent honoring the body, honoring the heart, learning to love, learning to care, learning to contain, learning to hold, learning to teach, so that the most beautiful part of the human being, the innocence, the magic, the flow, the enjoyment, the spontaneity can emerge. In a sociopathic culture, the masculine is a predator on the feminine. Every bit of innocence, every bit of openness, every bit of joy and spontaneity is preyed on. There's a target. Go get them. Sell them this. Do this. Do this. Do this. Doesn't matter what they feel. You got them. Get them here. Get them there. It's strategy to predate on the feminine. You know, whether this is manipulative selling strategies, manipulative leadership strategies, manipulative sexual strategies, it is a predation relationship on the feminine in both men and women. You've got yourself a sucker. Go sell the hell out of them. She's rich. She's an idiot. She trusts you. Sell the fucking hell out of her and come back with a deal. Not, wow, she's honoring the masculine. She's giving space for the masculine to protect her, to lead her in a healthy direction, to find the very best way for her well-being. She is open. If you tell her, I don't think my investment product is the best one for you. I think this one over here would be better. She'll listen because she retains some of her innocence, some of her trust. And that's beautiful. Protect it, honor it. No, what an idiot. She's an idiot for being feminine, and he's an idiot if he doesn't exploit it. Now this is sick. The whole yin-yang relationship has become one of predating the most important human essence. And we all pay the price for that. Because feminine energy, in its spontaneity, its innocence, its beauty, its joy, has always been the most sacred, beautiful human experience on the planet. And when we castrate it out of our men with shame, judgments, bullying, and failure to protect them, we teach them how to do the same to women, and women teach them how to do the same to women. I've been shamed and humiliated right and left by the women in my life who will not take a stand for my innocence, who will betray my trust for personal gain, who will exploit what is vulnerable for personal gain, for masculine strategies. I can do X, X, and X with your money. So I'm going to betray your trust, take your money, and do X, X, and X. It's the masculine betraying the feminine. It doesn't matter if it's a man, it doesn't matter if it's a woman. This does not change until we actively honor and love the feminine in each of us, and actively repel, reject, and fight off the predating masculine in women and in men. And we restore the balance, the sacred balance. The yin and the yang. Balance is a state of grace. It takes barely any energy at all to keep a pole balanced in the air. As soon as it gets to a 45-degree angle where it's just wildly off balance, suddenly it takes all this energy. It takes hardly any energy to keep the head balanced. But as soon as we lean over and start holding this 60 pounds of pressure, this angle, it starts taking more and more toll on us. Balance is the point of grace. And I want to thank you for honoring the feminine in you by directing, by your masculine directing yourself to hold your attention to this so that you can come out the other side more able and willing to honor the essence, feminine, joy, the spontaneity, the emotion, to protect her in yourself and in others.